It's going to be good. Tonight is probably one of my favorite discussions, my favorite subjects about about everything to do with food production. Because the soil is everything. If we understand what I'm talking about tonight, it would solve major world issues. Maybe I should wait until people get on here to talk about it, though. It would solve economic issues. The thing is, when I talk about this stuff, I seem so far off the wall. It's just so weird. I'm so far out there because people who haven't thought it through, who are just living their lives, you know, especially the more educated people. The more educated people are, the less they believe the things I say until they have a 6-hour conversation with me, and then they finally see where I'm coming from. Because I come from very, very complicated and complex places. It's very complex. It's very complicated, but it's the other side. Oliver Wendell Holmes has said, I'd give everything for simplicity on the other side of complexity, and that's what this is all about. What time is it? I can't even see my clock.
It's almost there.
Okay, we're gonna give it 2 or 3 minutes, and we'll see who shows up tonight. I know a lot of people have been watching the recordings. A lot of people can't come to the live ones on Thursday nights, which is totally fine. A lot of people couldn't come no matter when I did it, so it's totally fine. That's why I'm doing the recording. I've got friends on the East Coast, and this is starting at what time does it start on the East Coast? 10? Starts at 10. 10 at night on the East Coast. So by the time it gets done, some nights it's to midnight. And if you're working, you can't stay up all night for listen to me jump up and down and scream about stuff.
I mean, it starts at 8 my time, and I have a hard time getting up in the morning on Friday.
Oh dear, I need to make them shorter. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
What the recording is for, right? Okay, can you do a double check? Is my internet working good? Can you tell from your computer?
You haven't cut out at all. I'm not remoted into your computer, so I can't do a speed test.
I think we're really good. I shut everything down except for what we're doing here. So and I'm plugged in.
So long as you're hooked up to your Ethernet cable, you'll be good.
Yeah, I am. I think we're ready to go. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. It's time to start. This is showtime. So this is our free Q&A that I'm doing for gardening. I planned this out for 20 weeks. This is week number 4. And so we're excited about that. This is going to be awesome because tonight is one of my favorite subjects. This is one of my absolute favorite subjects. So originally I said I was going to be talking for 15 to 20 minutes. This week I'm talking for 30 to 40 minutes on this subject because I cannot do it justice unless I talk a little bit longer. Maybe I'll get through it quick and it'll be faster, and that's okay. If that's the way it happens, it's totally fine. So, but let me just welcome everybody here. I know there's a lot of people who are going to be watching this on the recording that we do, and that recording is found on my YouTube channel. And all of this information can be found on my website, which is on this page here in red down towards the bottom of this slide. But we do have some pretty awesome events that we've put together this year. Me and Jared have put together some excellent classes, and we're inviting you to participate in these classes at whatever level you choose and need. So there's my online class that goes through the Patreon page, and that's $8 a month. But that is my library, and I have hundreds of videos. There's over 300 posts altogether. Most of them are videos of me in my garden where I jump up and down and I scream about gardening and how much fun gardening is. So, but I do try to teach things. And as people who are on Patreon, as they ask me questions, I'm able to answer the questions in detail. And if you need more mentoring, that's an option that you can do too. One-on-one mentoring. And of course, this is our free weekly class tonight, our Zoom meeting. And so that's pretty fun. We're going through 20 important subjects about gardening. And we are on week 4 now, where we're going to be talking about the 4 spheres within the soil. But boot camp is coming up. I need to tell you about boot camp. Boot camp is this month. It's the last 3 days of this month, or at least the last 3, the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, last week. So boot camp is where you come to my garden and my greenhouse, and I work with you one-on-one. I mean, there is a group of people, but I don't let any more than 15 people in. So you will get personalized mentoring at this, but you can come here not knowing a thing about gardening, and I will teach you everything you need to know so that when you go home, you can put together a gardening system that will actually contribute significantly to feeding your family. So that is the purpose of boot camp. You come here, 3 days intense course. We are planting seeds. We are mixing potting soil. We are preparing a garden right on top of a grass lawn. We will put down cardboard and put compost on, and we will plant into it. And you can ask me a million questions and I will answer everything. My goal is that you go away from this boot camp knowing everything that you need to know to be able to accomplish a good food growing system. And then there's other things that are on here, and I'm not going to go into those tonight just to save time. But there are some other great classes coming up. There's another, I am going to mention one more. There's an Alan Savory event this month. Absolutely fantastic. It's the financial planning one. So if you are a person in agriculture and you have struggled to make a good profit, this is the one you want. This is an excellent class, and I'm going to be attending this one, but it's happening here on this ranch, and Jared Sorensen will be the main teacher of that class. So these are classes that we have created to help you secure a food source and to secure more freedom in your own life. We want to make sure that you are having freedom, and freedom begins with our basic inalienable rights. And there are times in history when those things are taken away for so many reasons. And one reason that I'm not going to get into that. That's a 10-hour discussion. But anyway, we do want to focus on these things. So sign up and come to boot camp. All the information you need is in red here at www.georgicrevolution.com. That is my website. If you have questions, my phone number is on the website. You can text me with questions. You can call me too, but I may not answer because I don't take my phone outside because I break phones. My lifestyle is a phone crusher. So I just check my phone 2 or 3 times a day. So texting is better. Let's go ahead and get started with my presentation tonight. So we're going to come down here to slide 25. And tonight we are talking about the 5 spheres that we find within the soil. So when you walk out into your garden or on your land or your farm, whether it's a pasture or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. If your soil is functioning, then you should be able to find these 5 spheres that are healthy and happy and thriving inside of your garden when you dig it up. Okay, so if one of these spheres is missing from your soil, then your soil is not functioning as good as it could be. You have opportunity for improvement. You have the opportunity for your soil to do better. if you don't have one of these spheres within your soil. And the way that you know what's happening in your soil is simple. It's called the shovel test. You walk out there on your land with a shovel and you dig up one big clump. So you put your shovel in the ground, you step on it. Now, if it's functioning properly in all climates of the earth, everywhere, as long as the ground is not frozen, when you put your foot on that shovel and you put your body weight on it, it should go in the ground all the way. If it's not going in all the way with your body weight, and even if you're a light person, you know, my daughter, she's pretty light, she's petite. When we go to a functioning soil, she'll jump on that shovel with both feet and it goes right in all the way. And that is what a functioning soil should do. And that means that your 5 spheres are working. So plunge your shovel in all the way and then pull it out and put it in at a 90 degree and pull it out and then another 90 degrees. So you have a hunk of soil. So you're looking at the soil, and we have pictures here we're going to look at in a minute. And then you pull that hunk out, and the hunk should not fall apart. If it falls apart like a newly tilled up garden soil, then something is wrong with your soil. A proper, good soil where all these spheres are working, the lump of soil, your shovelful, should not fall apart. If it's like sand in a sandbox or at the beach and it's falling apart, your Agradosphere and your Porosphere, your Rhizosphere, those things are not working at all. And what that means is when it rains, your water cycle will not be working. Remember, was it last week we talked about the 4 ecosystem processes? I think it was, or the week before. But anyway, with those ecosystem processes, they cannot work for you if your spheres aren't working. So let's just go through these a minute and talk about the definitions. Detritus means trash. I mean, it's just a common English, it's probably not a common English word, but I mean, it's common. Detritus, it's just trash. So the Destritosphere, what is the Destritosphere? It's the dead plant material that microbes eat. So bacteria and fungus and earthworms and microarthropods are going to be eating that dead organic matter. It's a food source for those guys. So you want a lot of detritus on your soil surface. And that's where you find the Destritospheres, on the soil surface. You will also find it suspended throughout the different horizons of the soil. And we're not going to get into soil horizons tonight. That's too technical, and we don't need to do that for successful food production. But we can find the detritus down, 4 inches, 8 inches, 14, maybe even 30 inches into the soil. If you have a species of earthworm that's going 30 or 40 inches in the soil, the earthworms will take the detritus down into the soil. And so 99% of the Destritosphere is on the soil surface. A small portion of it can be suspended down inside. And the more that the bugs do get down in, the better off your soil is. So if you're in a pasture situation with livestock and you have dung beetles, they will take the dung and they will put it down in the ground and they compost that for you down in the ground. That's a great thing. So that's part of the Destritosphere. Okay, so let's move to number 2, the Agronosphere. The Agronosphere is when your soil is made, it gets glued together. And there's 2 organism groups that are responsible for the Agronosphere. You've got the bacteria, and they make micro aggregates. They glue the little tiny microscopic particles of soil together, and they form these micro aggregates. You can't see them with the naked eye. That's why it's called a micro aggregate. But then the fungus comes along and it will bind a whole bunch of those micro aggregates together into a macro aggregate, and you can see those, and that's why they're called a macro aggregate, because they're big enough to see with the naked eye. So the Agronosphere, when you pull up that hunk of soil with your shovel and you're looking at it, you want to be able to see a cottage cheese type texture to that soil. And you're playing with it. If you took a piece of it the size of a tennis ball or a softball, whatever, and you're tossing it back and forth from one hand to the other, what's going to happen is it should not fall apart very much. Little parts of those aggregates may come apart a little bit, but for the most part, it should hold together. Okay, not like a brick or a piece of concrete, but it should be holding together pretty good. And it's because the aggregates are put together by the fungus and the bacteria. Okay, the Porosphere. The Porosphere is created by the Agradosphere, and it simply is the pore spaces that are left over when the fungus pulls those macroaggregates together, the spaces between the aggregates. And so you should see holes and spaces between the aggregates when you're looking at the soil. You should be able to see that. And if you can't see that, then you may not have a good functioning Porosphere. The Rhizosphere, rhizome means root in Latin. So Rhizosphere is just the roots of all the different plants. And when we're talking about the Rhizosphere, you want to have a multitude of different plant species that are in that Rhizosphere. You should have, 4, 8, 20 different types of plants growing together. So mix up your gardens with all kinds of different plants growing together. And that'd be a good thing to do for lots of reasons, for your microbial health in the soil, for the plant health, for the nutrition of your plants. I mean, there's some awesome studies being done right now that are showing that the nutrition of foods we're eating are more nutritious if they're grown in polycultures rather than monocultures, which is pretty neat. So not all weeds are bad. It's just bad if they overtake your garden, right? And that is bad for sure. Let's go to number 5 is the Drillosphere. The Drillosphere is the earthworms and what the earthworms do. They drill the holes down in the ground. And the earthworms are vectors in a good way to, usually when we talk about a vector, we're talking about something that carries a disease. But a vector is just something that carries something else and introduces and inoculates something. So the earthworms are a vector in a good way to move the microbes around to where we need them, because an earthworm can travel, 2 or 3 feet pretty quick, like within less than a minute, maybe, if it wanted to go to somewhere else. But as they travel around, they move the microbes. It could take a microbe like maybe 2 or 3 generations to go a couple of feet in the soil. 2 feet, 4 feet, it's a long ways for a microbe to travel. So if you have the earthworms in the ground, they will move the beneficial microbes where you need them. So let's just go back through these really quick and look at the function. So what is the function of the Destritosphere? The Destritosphere feeds the microbes. The Destritosphere is an armor on top of the soil to keep the soil surface from getting too hot when the sun's shining and getting too cold when it's super cold at night. So that Destritosphere is absolutely crucial. But those are 2 of the main reasons. A third main reason, a purpose, function for the Destritosphere is to keep the soil. Let's see, what is it? To keep it, to keep the moisture in your water cycle. You want to keep the water cycle working. And so if you have a bare soil and there's no Destritosphere, then your evaporation happens a lot quicker. But with the detritus on top of your soil surface, it keeps the moisture in the ground, and it keeps that rainfall that you get where it's supposed to be. So those are some major reasons for the Destritosphere. Number 2, the Agronosphere. What is the function of the Agronosphere? The function of that is it keeps your soil structure together. It holds together so that when water goes through the soil, the soil absorbs the water like a sponge instead of the water flowing away. So the Agronosphere stops erosion. If you have a good aggregated soil, you will not be having an erosion problem, which means you're not polluting nearby streams and ponds. Say you have a beautiful pond with fish in it. Well, if you don't have a good Agronosphere and it rains a lot and your water all runs off, then it can kill your fish in your pond because your pond is all muddy and nasty. And so the Agronosphere has a lot of awesome benefits. The Porosphere are all the spaces in the soil where the water can get down in, and it can hold that moisture in there, and it just sits in there for a long time if you have good pore spaces. So you can infiltrate lots and lots of the rain and the irrigation that you put on there. If you have a lot of people think, well, I have this terrible problem with my garden because all the water's running off. I have this terrible runoff problem. That's not true. People don't have a runoff problem. What they have is an infiltration problem. And infiltration problems are the real problem, and it's because they lack a proper Agradosphere and Porosphere. And the others too, because you have to have all 5 of these for them all to function properly. There's one more really important function of the Porosphere, and that is oxygen. Oxygen is probably one of the most important nutrients that goes into the soil. A lot of times we talk about nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium and calcium and all these other things that we need in the soil, but the oxygen is one of the very most important. Without oxygen, everything else stops. If you're lacking something else, things can still try to get by and make things happen. So the Porosphere is spaces to help the oxygen get down in there. Number 4, the function of the Rhizosphere. One of the very most important purposes and functions of the Rhizosphere is it is the second food source for the microbes in the soil. Remember, the first food source is the Destritosphere. So the Rhizosphere is your second food source for the microbes. If you don't have a good functioning Rhizosphere, this whole system will fall apart and it will not be working good. That's why much of the time as farmers, we are dependent upon a lot of the man-made fertilizers, is because we don't have living roots in the soil except for during the growing season. We should strive for a living root in the soil every day of the year. So in North America, we have a winter. So what good is a living root in the soil? That living root still harbors and keeps the beneficial microbes alive. So we still need to have them. So what would we plant in our garden? Well, you plant the cereals, wheat, oats, barley, rye, triticale. Plant those in the fall, and that will keep a living root in the soil. And then in the summer, you could terminate that by mowing or by rolling it down or by covering it with cardboard. There's a lot of ways to terminate a crop. And then you would immediately after termination, like at the same time, you would plant the plants you're wanting to grow, your other food crops. And number 5, the main function of the Drillosphere is, let's think about an analogy of a city. In a city, we have semi trucks that come in, but if you only have a 2-lane road, it's inefficient and it's hard to get those trucks in there. But if you have a big freeway system, lots of trucks can bring stuff in and they can bring it in quick. And so that's what the Drillosphere does. It opens up great big giant tunnels. Think microscopically for a minute. If you're a microbe and you're at the edge of an earthworm hole, it's a long ways. It's like the Grand Canyon across that earthworm hole to get to the other side. So those are very large highways. Think of highways, think of airport runways, think of train tracks that can bring in all of the nutrients needed for proper plant growth. So the earthworms, that's one of the main functions of that Drillosphere. Let's move on and look at some pictures. So here's a picture. This is me doing a shovel test. So the shovel test, you simply dig up a clump of soil, the biggest clump you can dig up with a shovel, and lift it out of the ground. So, you know, if you were trying to be scientific, you could measure out 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 by 12, and then go 12 inches deep, and you could cut that out and bring up a cube. You certainly don't need to do that, but that would make a pretty fun thing to do. And if you did that, you could take the thing completely apart and you could count your earthworms. So in a 12 by 12 by 12, which means a cubic foot of soil, how many earthworms? Wonder where my chat box is. You guys should type in your chat. How many earthworms do you think you should find in a cubic foot of soil when you took it apart to have a healthy soil? 30, 20. You guys are doing great. You're very, very close. Anybody else want to guess before I tell you? Earthworms. How many earthworms in a cubic foot to have a healthy functioning soil? The answer is 20. Jocelyn says 40. If you had 40, I think it would be better. If you had 30, it's better than 20. But if you have 20, you're doing pretty good. If you only had 2, you have a long ways to go. If you have 500, you probably have a serious ecological imbalance. You don't have any birds. You don't have any moles. You don't have any, I don't know what other predators are there of earthworms. I don't even know. But I know moles, and I bet coyotes eat them. Believe it or not, they'll eat anything and everything. But yeah, so earthworms, you should have a lot of earthworms. Like 20 is the textbook answer, but if you had 40 or 60, that'd be really good. But let's look at this picture and see what we're actually looking at. What are we dealing with in this picture? When you do a shovel test like this, what are you looking for? Obviously, we're looking at the 5 spheres. So on the very top, look at the picture here. Look at the bottom where you actually see the dead grass. So look at the bottom of the picture, right underneath that, you can see there's flattened grass there. There's about 1 inch of dead flattened grass on top of this soil. So that is part of the Destritosphere. When I pulled this out of the ground and then I laid it on its side. So the right side of that picture, you can see the shovel on the right side of the soil sample. That's actually the bottom. Where my fingers are, that's the top of the soil. And when I turned it over, most of the detritus on there fell off. But between my fingers is mostly the Rhizosphere, which is number 4 of the roots. That is about 2 to 3 inches there that are almost completely saturated with roots, tons and tons of roots. I think if we took that apart and analyzed it carefully, there are probably, like, there's way more than half of that is roots compared to soil, which is an interesting thought. Now, if you look next to it, you see that strip of soil there it has a lighter color. I don't even know what color that is. We can call it white. It's obviously not white, but it's kind of gray. Well, that's a hard pan. So I took my penetrometer out there and I stuck it in the ground, and it went down 3 inches, and then it hit a hard pan of 150 pounds per square inch. So, and then I punched through it, and then it went down about another foot or so, maybe 1.5 feet. And I hit another hard pan, but the second hard pan is not showing up on this shovel test. It was below that. But when we look at this, are there any aggregates in there? If you look at the very bottom of that top portion, that brown portion that I said was mostly roots, you can see how it's kind of flaking apart and it looks kind of cottage cheesy in there. So we are seeing aggregates in that top section. In that middle gray section that's only about 1 inch thick, there's no aggregates there at all. But below it, it goes back to brown, and it had pretty good aggregation. As I ran my fingers across that, and you can see at the very top of the picture there, at the top of the soil sample, you can see how it's kind of falling apart. Well, those are aggregates in there. So that was well aggregated. And then if you go to the very bottom of the sample, which is on the far right, it's a much darker color. It's almost a black color. And that super dark color there, it was well aggregated. So my aggregation was pretty good, except there's that hard pan, which was causing a problem. See, most roots of most food crops will not penetrate 150 pounds of pressure. So I only have 3 inches here to grow vegetables on. So I would have to do something to break up that hard pan. And there's different things we could do. The best thing to do is to add a whole bunch of a thick Destritosphere on top and inoculate it with lots of microbes. And as the microbes start working down through it, they will break it up naturally. And depending on the chemical composition of that hard pan, we may have to do some other things. But that is beyond the scope of our discussion tonight. But like you could take a ripper through there with a tractor, you could rip it. But if you did that, you would want to be spraying the microbes in the trench as you rip it. So they're down, suspended all the way through beyond that hard pan for it to have a really good effect. Because a lot of times if you have a chemical problem in the soil that's causing the hard pan, then it will just reform a hard pan pretty good. There is another thing we could do with the hard pan, and I love to grow Daikon radishes because Daikon radishes will penetrate 150 pounds pretty easy. So I have a lot of Daikon radishes growing in my food producing systems because they will simply just go down and they'll go right through those hard pans. They will not penetrate 300 psi. I think it was Purdue University, and they've done some extensive research showing that there's no plant alive today that they've done research on anyway, that will penetrate 300 pounds. So, you know, and I have actually hit some that were 300 pounds here on the ranch, which is interesting. So, but the plants growing here, there's different kinds of just grasses. This is just a perennial grassland where I pulled this soil sample and took this picture. And it's a great picture to see because you can see that it's growing beautiful grass. In fact, this is, we cut hay in this field last year and the grass was almost 6 feet high. I could easily get lost in that field because when you're cutting grass, it's like, it's up way above my eyes. So it's really fun to be out in such a productive, beautiful grassland, yet it still has that hard pan. And that hard pan was not just in one place, it was consistent across acres of this area, which was pretty awesome to see that even though there are serious problems in this soil, meaning that hard pan was a bad problem, it was still growing a wonderful crop. So you don't have to have perfect soil to grow a wonderful crop, but you do have to have a soil that's good enough to grow a good crop. So yes, this soil was aggregated. It had a good porosphere, except for the hard pan, there was no pores there. There were very few roots on the bottom of that hard pan too. So most of the root action is only 3 inches in there. There were no earthworms. The earthworm count was 0 in all the different shovel tests I did on this piece of property. The earthworm count was absolutely 0. So there was no Drillosphere at all. So with no Drillosphere, this is like a thriving community. Think of a big metropolitan area with no freeway. but they still have needs. Grocery stores still need food to come on the Cisco truck. All the different things that you get at Costco and Walmart and Sam's Club and all the different stores, well, there's no good highway system to get those things in there, but the demand is just as important. So anyway, it's pretty important to understand these things, because if we can fix each of these spheres within the soil, we can fix most of the problems in agriculture today. We can fix the low quality in our nutrition of food, because the food will have ample health. It will be the most healthy food, the most healthy plant, and that equals the most healthy food, because the secondary metabolites are going to grow. And anyway, so here they are, the 5 spheres within the soil. Let's go to our next picture here. This picture is showing, this is the very same sample, and I broke this open because you can start to see some of the spheres really well. This is showing like really clearly the Agradosphere, because you can see the aggregates. And remember, it looks like particles of cottage cheese. It's a cottage cheese type texture. And you can see that when I ripped it open with my hands, you can see those particles in there. The aggregates are holding together, but they're falling apart. And you can see the spaces between them, which is the Porosphere. And of course, you can see roots in there, which is the Rhizosphere. And the Destritosphere, you can't see it in this picture. But just on a note, when a plant dies and its roots are in the ground and they die and decompose, that's part of your Destritosphere, just in case you wanted that clarification. And of course, I already mentioned there was no Drillosphere in here. That's one reason I pulled this apart. I wanted to see if there were any earthworm holes. And I took this completely apart. I spread it all out, and I found 0 earthworms and 0 earthworm holes. Because sometimes the earthworms will burrow down deep and you won't see them. But if you see a lot of earthworm holes, then you know that they are there and they're active. But in this picture, they were not. Let's go to the next picture. Okay, this is a picture. This is in a neighboring field. And I dug this one up, but it just fell completely apart. This one fell apart because the spheres were not working. I tried to pick it up, and it was like picking up a lump of sand that was obviously not lumped together. It was just falling apart. Even though there was a Rhizosphere in here, there were a lot of plant roots in there, it still was just falling to pieces. And so it was not working. Now, it's interesting to note that the different moisture levels in soil will make a difference. So when you're doing a side-by-side comparison, your moisture levels need to be the same. And so you need to remember, if you're going to test your soil from year to year to see if your spheres are becoming more healthy or less healthy, you need to do it with the same moisture level. So, either do it when it's dry or do it when it's wet. You don't want to do it one year if it's when it's dry, and then the next year when it's wet, you're going to get different results. So you need to keep those things kind of the same. I've got another really cool picture here. So I took my penetrometer out, and this was again another field, but I took my penetrometer out and it went in 1 inch, and then I hit 150 pounds. And this is one of our least productive fields here. And you can see why. And I will decipher what I'm seeing in this picture. The root, so I dug this up after I gauged it at 150 pounds with my instrument. And then I dug this up, and and that is as deep as I could go with my shovel. So I only pulled up 3 inches. I couldn't go more than 3 inches with my shovel to get this out of the ground. So that lump of soil is 3 inches thick, but at 1 inch, where my penetrometer said 150 pounds, the root went straight down, and then it made a 90-degree turn, and it went along for about 2 or 3 inches there, and then it found a spot where it could go down. And so it went down maybe a 1/2 inch, and then it went horizontal again, and you can see it making that lumpy, bumpy line right here. So here it's coming along, and then it's coming down. It's trying to go down. No, this is a perennial pepperweed. They have a long, straight down taproot. They're an early succession plant. If you're in mid-succession, these cease to grow. And so this shows us that we're in early succession, which we talked about in an earlier class. But I love this picture because it's showing this root coming along. And then there's that other root that's going along, and it looks like it's kind of on a 45-degree angle here, but it wasn't attached to the soil. Gravity had actually pulled it down. It was actually, I think, going along right here. So this root here that I'm touching with my cursor right now, I think it was going along horizontally right here. And if you look at this piece of soil, you can kind of see that right here, this is all we have in topsoil. And then right at that 150, the soil changes right there. And so this soil is not functioning at all. It's miserable. And so how do we fix that? How do we fix it? And if you have a soil like this, a lot of people say, oh, go there in there with some deep tillage and till that up and loosen it up. That is one option. But if you choose that option, and that would not be my recommendation, I think there's better ways to do it. But if that was your option and that's what you chose to do, you would want to incorporate an amazing amount of microbes to fix that soil compaction at the time of doing that. Because if you don't, as soon as you get it soaked with water, it's only going to take a matter of months after soaking it, maybe even weeks, depending on your soil type. And it could be compacted just as bad as it is now. And so the trouble that you went through to till it up didn't really help. So anyway, I would really like to plant some Daikon radishes in this field and see what happens. I don't think we're going to this year because we don't have enough snow on the mountain to irrigate that field. And since it's one of our least productive fields, we're going to use our irrigation water for other fields. But at some point, if we get a lot of snow, I want to put a ton of Daikon radishes in here just as an experiment and see if they will punch through and make this work. So let me move on here to this next to this next slide here. So what do we actually do to manage for a super healthy soil so that our 5 spheres within the soil are working? Well, what we're going to manage is we're going to manage plants. Okay, we're not going to manage the livestock so much because livestock are just another tool to manage plants. So we need a whole bunch of tools to use to manage the plants. So many times people think, oh, I'm managing my livestock. There's even professional degrees called livestock management. You can, and people hire livestock managers. People might call me a livestock manager because I manage livestock here on the ranch. But actually, we use livestock as a tool to manage plants. So plants are the easiest thing to manage, to be able to get our soil to function the best way, because we have a vast array of all kinds of different plants we can use for different types of management to manage those 5 spheres within the soil. So if we have compaction, what do? We probably need some early succession plants with really powerful deep taproots to go down to break up hard pans. We would want to be growing those with an array of plants. You never would want to grow a monocrop. It just takes so much time to grow a monocrop, because if you took 10 years and you grow a monocrop each year, then that would be 10 plants that you would be growing but they would all do the same thing in 1 year. So you could speed it up a decade by planting them all together to get the same functionality out of the soil. In fact, I don't think after 10 years of monocropping, you wouldn't have the same benefit to the soil as you would have after 1 year of planting 10 good species together that second year. So you certainly want to manage the plants in a way that makes sense to make your soil what it is you want and need. But let's talk about livestock for a second. Usually when I say livestock, most people in my world just automatically think cattle, and then maybe a few horses, maybe sheep. Well, I'm talking about anything that's pretty much not a plant. You know, I'm including fungus as a livestock. Your microbes are super important livestock to use. Your microarthropods do an amazing work in the soil. So all those microscopic little guys that are in the soil, you want to be making sure that they're in the soil. And so how do you get them in the soil? By managing plants. Have that detritosphere on top. Remember, the detritosphere is the dead organic matter. It's the dead plant material on top of the soil. So you put that on top of the soil, and it's feeding the livestock that you want and need. And then when you're looking at your let's see, I'm trying to think of other livestock. Worms are certainly livestock and super important. But all of your insect life, that would be livestock. But you always manage these guys by managing plants. People will buy worms. They will buy microbes. They'll get all these bugs in a jug. They'll buy all these things. And as soon as you start doing all that, it's good to introduce them as an initial inoculation. But if you find that you're having to re-inoculate them every year, your plant management isn't working. So just always have that detritosphere working. And then always have the living root in the soil, that rhizosphere. So those are the two things you do. Manage those plants. And then your microbes will make that soil function. Okay. Okay, I don't even have a clock here. Ezekiel, what time is it?
It is 8:46.
Okay, sounds good. Maybe we should move on to, I have some more here I could talk about. It just depends what you guys want. Type in the chat what you want. I can keep going on this slide for 10 minutes, or we can start on Q&A, or we can do it both at the same time. But type your questions into the chat box. I see Jocelyn has a question in here about earthworms, low earthworm populations. So I'm going to start with that one. More soil slides. I can do that. Except I don't think I have anymore. I just have this one. But I can do more for other classes if you want, for sure. So Jocelyn says, if you have a low earthworm population, do you bring in more worms or just balance other things and they come naturally? Yes and yes. If you simply don't have earthworms, you need to know why. Is there a toxicity in your soil that has killed everything? Are plants growing in that soil? If the plants are already growing there, then you probably have especially if there's a lot of weeds growing, you probably have a good bacterial count. And that would be a good food source for the earthworms. They eat the bacteria. So yeah, if you brought earthworms into your garden, that'd be a wonderful thing to do. In fact, I sell worms. I have a little worm farm here and I'm producing worms. Today was a good day. I was on my hands and knees for about 2 hours just picking up worms. It was so cool. I was just going through my worm farm and I was just picking worms. I picked about 25 pounds of worms today. That is a lot of earthworms. I weighed them and everything. I put some in a bucket for my son. Ezekiel's going to start his own worm farm. And then I put a bunch of worms in a compost that needed worms. So that was pretty great. But yes, if you have food for the worms, they should be there. So I don't know why they're not in this field that I just showed you pictures of. There should be more worms than there are, and I haven't figured out why yet. When I did microscopy analysis on that field, the only thing in that sample, the sample of the pictures you saw, let me go back to the picture so you know, because I did show different pictures. This picture right here, this was a pretty awesome picture because this is our most productive hay field. And we don't fertilize it at all, but the cattle graze it once a year, and then we cut hay off of it. And it produces a lot of hay. Very, very productive field. It is an irrigated field, and you'd think that it would be teeming with earthworms. Well, it had 0 earthworms, 0 microarthropods, no fungus, and what's the other one? But it had lots of bacteria, no protozoa, which is interesting. So, you know, why? Why do these things happen? And we don't even know why this stuff happens. You know, so we have to figure it out. So that's something I'm working on this year. Why is our most productive field not as productive as it ought to be? Okay, let me go down. Let's
I do have some questions people have sent me over the week as well.
Okay, perfect. Let me just finish this slide since we had somebody say they wanted me to keep going a little bit. So how do we actually manage? What is it that we actually do to build these 5 spheres so that our soil is working really good? Well, we cannot manage with a reductionist science point of view. We have to use a holistic science. And let me just briefly explain, if you don't know what the difference is between holistic and reductionist, it can take a long time to explain this, but I'm going to do it in a nutshell. Reductionist science is understanding something from its very smallest part, okay? And so if you want to understand a deer or an elk or any other animal, we would look at its cells through a microscope. And there could be some people who focus just on the hooves of a certain animal, and that's their whole career. That's reductionist science. With holistic science, if you're going to study a deer or an elk, you would go out into nature and you would watch the deer or the elk in their natural habitat, and you would try to notice and make observations of how they interact with their entire environment. What do they do in the summer, in the winter, in the fall, in the springtime? What is their social structure between the does and the bucks and the fawns? How do they deal with predators? How does their hair grow in the summer versus the winter? What kind of plants do they eat? So you would look at the entire ecosystem where an organism lives, and you would try to look at the whole picture to understand a species. Okay, so when we're managing our soils, the soils are so complex. There are not enough doctoral students and master's students doing research to figure out what is actually happening in the soils. It is a wide open field. If any young people wanted to go into that, you could spend your entire life contributing to society to learn all of the awesome, wonderful things there are about soil function and about these 5 spheres within the soil. Because we think we know stuff, but we're learning so much. Like, it's just been in recent times that we knew that microbes ate the exudates that plants put out into the soil. If we would have known that 60 years ago and understood what we understand now, the world would be a different place now. It really would, because food would be healthier. The carbon cycle would be working properly, meaning we wouldn't need to spend so much money on our fertilizers, which means farmers would not have a huge demographic of suicide rates, and this just snowballs to all these different aspects of society. But anyway, yeah, holistic science is really important when it comes to our soils. So if we just, let me tell you another example of reductionist science. If you read in a gardening book and they say, pull a soil sample, send it to your laboratory for a soil test, and then you do that, you are participating in reductionist science. It's a good tool, but you need to know what to do with it once you get it back. And if they say, okay, now just put on this certain amount of fertilizer and that'll grow your plants. Yeah, it's true, it'll grow your plants, but you are contributing to less quality food, and you are contributing to the destruction of these 5 spheres of the soil. You're killing your microbes. There's just a lot of weird things that can start happening, which are causing a lot of the problems that we have today in society. So holistic science is just a better way to approach these whole things, because the ecosystem is dynamic and it's so complex. And the reductionist science tries to remove the complexity. And in doing so, we remove all the species that can function in the soil, so that if one species naturally did die, there's nothing to take its place. Okay, let's move on to some questions. I see questions here, but Zeke, you read them to me. That's worked really good in past weeks.
Okay, this is a question from Charla here in the class. I'll just read the ones that people put in right now.
Okay, perfect.
We just moved and our soil was a lot of clay. I ordered soil with mulch and manure mixed in, but it smells like it's fresh from the farm, meaning it smells like poop. I planned to put it on top of our garden, but I'm wondering if it wasn't seasoned properly and may burn my plants. Shouldn't it not smell like fresh manure?
Okay, perfect question. I'm glad you asked it. And you are right. It should not smell that way. You don't want to grow your plants in an anaerobic condition. And if your soils smell bad, they are an anaerobic condition. So you can have rotten egg smells, you can have manure smells, barnyard smells, septic tank smells, chemical type smells. Those are anaerobic organisms making that happen. Now, you need to understand why that's important. All of the plant diseases that will kill your garden live in anaerobic conditions. Human pathogens that kill people live in anaerobic conditions. Animal pathogens that make animals sick and kill animals live in anaerobic conditions. So you need to get all of that soil that you have that smells bad, and you need to aerate it. You need to get it exposed to oxygen so that the good, how do I explain this in a good way? It's just, you just have to get rid of the anaerobic guys. Okay, your aerobic organisms will outcompete the anaerobic ones, and they'll make a really good soil out of that material. So I wouldn't send it back. I wouldn't call somebody and scream at them. I wouldn't do any of that stuff, because it's still good material that you have. It depends how soon you're going to plant your garden. If you spread that out across your garden and it was only an inch or 2 thick, then that is thin enough that the aerobic organisms can start working on it. So that's one option. Spread it out about an inch thick across your garden, maybe even 2 inches thick, but not much more than that, because you want to make sure that oxygen can penetrate it. And then keep it watered. It has to have moisture for these beneficial organisms to live. And then they will start growing in the presence of the oxygen, and the oxygen will be present because it's very thin. If you go and put it out there a foot thick, you're going to have anaerobic patches in there. And there's a chance for the bad organisms to still be alive. If you're trying to plant your plants right now, it's not going to work. So what you need to do is, just wait until the smell goes away. That could be pretty quick. It could be like within a week. It could be fine. Okay. Now, if you have big clumps in it, those clumps need to be broken up. So I don't know how fine this material is, but if there are clumps, you want to do some breaking up of the clumps. So I don't know if you have a way to do that or not. If it's super clumpy and it's hard to spread out an inch or two thick, then you probably need to just put it in a pile and compost it for 6 months until the bad smells go away. So that's another option. So anyway, there you go. That's my answer.
Awesome. So the next question is, The next question is, I've listened to you talk about these concepts of soil health in person on Patreon and here. I find it so fascinating. What resources would you recommend for further study?
Okay, so for further study. Okay, I'm looking at your thing. So this is Jocelyn who asked this. Okay. All right, here you go. You asked for it. Let me go down here to a slide. Take a screenshot of this. This is the answer to your question. If you want to get your PhD from YouTube, go right ahead. Watch every TED Talk, every YouTube video, and every webinar that these people have done, and you will know as much as I know. And it'll take you about 3 years to go through them all. Ray Archuleta, Elaine Ingham, Charles Dowding, Alan Savory, Joseph Lofthouse, Mary Cole. I don't need to read them. But what if you can't look at all these? This is a frustrating answer. I ask people answer questions, and what I really ask is like, where do I start? And I'm assuming, Jocelyn, that that's what you're asking, is where should I start? So let me look at these real quick. And give
Can
you.
I make a suggestion?
Let me give you 3 people to start with. Yeah. Zeke, hold on 1 second. Start with watching some of the YouTubes of Ray Archuleta. Watch Alan Savory's TED Talk. But when you watch this stuff, you can't get political. Most people who listen to me are conservative Americans. You can't listen to the things that science people say and think they are talking with like a liberal agenda. They're not talking with any political agenda usually, but a lot of times there are certain people in politics who have hijacked phrases and terms from the science to promote their liberal agendas, of which solutions I don't think will work. And so when you're listening to some of these people, if they start talking about things like climate change, I mean, I totally believe in climate change, but I don't think that I've never heard a politician talk about a proposal that will work for climate change. And the definitions of what they say of climate change and what I mean when I say it are 2 different things. So keep that in mind. So listen. So Ray Archuleta, start listening to some of his stuff. Start listen. Go to Alan Savory's speech, and then let me pick one more. And then look up Sir Albert Howard's book. He's dead now, so he's not online. But look up his book and read that. Those are 3 great places to start. Ezekiel, what's your comment about this?
My comment was just to dig into Alan Savory to start off, because he goes at it from the most central viewpoint, and from him you can branch out into all the others. And I think that he does the best job of explaining not only what to do, but why it's important to do it.
Okay, good. Good perspective. I totally lost my chat and I don't know how to find it. Zeke, read me the next one.
Okay, let me see. So the next one in order is one that some people have sent me over the week. The first one, is there a ratio we should be following of years that a field is given over to cattle or other livestock versus years we want to use it for plant production?
I don't understand the question.
Well, like say
what that meant.
Sorry, he's what he was wanting to know is like if he has cattle on a piece of pasture for a year, can next year he put it into, growing broccoli or what have you? Or does he need his cattle on there 2 years or?
Yeah, absolutely. As far as soil health goes, it's better if you have animal impact this like simultaneously. Obviously, if you have a big field of vegetables, you're not going to turn a herd of cattle in or your vegetables are gone. But think about the cycle of the year. So you've got 12 months and you have a cycle that's happening in the soil. You're going to have a wet season, you're going to have a dry season, you're going to have a cold season, you're going to have a hot season, generally in most soils. And so when would the cattle go in? Well, if you could grow a great big beautiful bunch of greenery and you harvest what you're going to eat off of it, and then you turn your cattle in the same day. As soon as your harvest is gone, the cattle go in there, they tromp the ground, they eat a whole bunch of it, they urinate on lots of it, and then they defecate all over it. That is wonderful because that is adding all kinds of food to build a healthier Agronosphere and a healthier Porosphere, because you're adding all of that detritus. The earthworms are going to be thriving. Hopefully you have dung beetles in your climate, and they will be working there in that soil. So that would be a great thing to be able to do that. How long would you leave them in there? Maybe one day, maybe 1 week. It depends on how much food there is for them. You certainly don't want them to be in there so long that they compact your soil. I would say 1 week is way too long. I would want them on a garden plot for maybe 1 hour. So if you could be out there herding and just spend a day with your cows, move them around your garden so they're on different parts. And who has time to do that? I don't know. But that would be a great way to do it. Americans probably don't think they have time to do that. But that's part of the problem of what's wrong with America. Okay, next question.
All right. The next question is, is it a realistic possibility that I could selectively breed plants in my area that are currently weeds to be an edible food source?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, as long as they don't have like toxins, plants with alkaloids, those are toxins, they kill you. So, I mean, you don't want to start but that's kind of obvious. But yeah, I mean, is there a plant that's desirable to you? You could do that. Like lamb's quarters and amaranth. Those are terrible, noxious weeds that everybody hates all the time, but you can totally eat them. They're completely, absolutely edible. So this perennial pepperweed right here, you can eat it. I don't know that it has any nutritional value, but I've eaten it and I'm still alive. And it tastes, the root is hot like horseradish. There's all kinds of things we could explore. My good friend Joseph Lofthouse told me something amazing I had no idea about. But he said that like scarlet runner beans. I don't know if you know what scarlet runner beans are, but there's different types of beans. There's all these different classes of beans. And I am not a connoisseur of the millions of types of beans in the world. But he told me that the scarlet runner beans, and scarlet ones are obviously red, but there's a whole group of runners. But they produce a bulb, like a bulbous root, and you can eat that. Well, why aren't we cultivating that as a food source? I mean, I've never heard of that before. I've never dreamed of such a thing. Next question.
All right, next question. My family is very new to eating off our own farm. We are concerned about the cooking process. Do you have any advice or resources for preparing meals all from your own farm? Several people who've asked me versions of this question have also wanted resources for butchering animals and making cheese.
Yeah, it's a lost and dying art. It's a tragedy that our society has advanced to a point where we don't know how to eat anymore. We don't recognize food. I forget the book. Maybe you will remember it, Ezekiel, and can help me answer it. But there's a book, and there was a guy, and he was a prisoner in a camp, I think World War II. He was there, and he had some of his family members with him, and the alfalfa was growing around the edges under the fence, and he would pick it and eat it. And he was punished for stealing rations because he was in such good health. Everybody else was skin and bones and starving to death, and they were fat and happy. And he kept telling the other people in the prison camp, come with us, there's plenty of alfalfa growing, just come eat it with us. And the other people there, they were proud, whoever, I was going to say Englishmen, but I don't remember who they were. And they were saying, no, we're not going to be reduced to eating weeds. We would rather starve to death and die. And many of them did, you know. But I mean, alfalfa, it has every vitamin known to man. That didn't answer your question. But the tragedy is we don't know how to eat from our own farms anymore. This is not a society going in the right direction. This is going backwards. This is nuts. This is crazy. So yes, we absolutely need to be doing that. I actually made 3 or 4 cooking videos on my Patreon channel because I've been hearing people talk about this kind of thing. So if you're a Patreon member, you can scroll through that library and I show you how to make a sandwich. That sounds really funny, but I had one person say, I absolutely loved this. They might be on here tonight. And this was one of the best videos. I want more like this. And I haven't done very many cooking videos. But yeah, I mean, I butcher my own meat. We butchered a cow last year and 3 pigs, and we butchered a bunch of chickens. Yeah, so we do all our own meat. We have our own eggs. We have a cow that it's the neighbor here, but we share milk, and we have a cow here in the community. There's another neighbor up the street a few miles away, like 6 miles north, who have cows, and we've got milk from them this last summer. So it's a wonderful thing to have a community where we can share food with each other and eat. I don't have a good answer for you of where to go to learn how to cook food from a garden and all this stuff, but I'm going to start doing that more on Patreon. That's good. Let me make a note. I'm going to write that down. We're going to start making more cooking videos. But what else did I do? I don't know. I know I did some, just simple ones. Let me give you a recipe right now for most greens. So you grow a broccoli plant, and everybody cuts the head out, and they take it in and eat it. And then the rest of it, they don't know what to do with it. So it dries up, or it goes in the compost, or it gets fed to an animal. Broccoli leaves are one of the most nutritious foods on the planet. And it's way more nutritious than the broccoli head. At least that's what I'm told. I don't even know how to do these nutritional tests, but that's what people smarter than me tell me. So all I can do is believe them until I learn more. But if you take those broccoli leaves and you just chop them up pretty fine, you chop them up like, you know, 1/2 inch squares or whatever, or 1/4 inch, but 1/4 inch is pretty tiny. And then you just take a frying pan, put a little bit of butter in it, melt the butter down, and then you throw some handfuls of those chopped broccoli leaves in there, and so you put them in on high heat, and you stir it around for like 15-20 seconds, and then you turn it down to low as it'll go. You put the lid on it for whatever, like 30 minutes, and you come back and you have this beautiful, wonderful creation. But you can do that with broccoli leaves, with the broccoli head, with cauliflower leaves and cauliflower. You can do that with cabbage, the big leaves of the cabbage and the cabbage head. You can do that with kale and collards. You can do it with so many things. The rutabaga leaves. How many of you have rutabagas and are growing rutabagas? They're such a good crop to grow. They taste very, very yummy as you know, just as a raw vegetable. A lot of people will grow turnips. I personally don't really like the turnips so much, but a rutabaga looks like a turnip, but their flavor is superior. So those are just some super cool, fun things that I love about cooking. I wish I had a better resource. I'm going to be the resource for cooking. I'm going to start incorporating and making a lot more cooking videos, because guess what? Like 3, 4, 5 times a week, I walk into the house with an armload of stuff from the Wallapini greenhouse. I go in the kitchen and I make food and we eat it. My wife has a cabbage soup on the stove right now on a simmer cooking, which is pretty awesome. You know, from the greenhouse. So yeah, I mean, I wish I could point you somewhere to sign up for my Patreon if you're not, and I will start doing a lot more cooking videos. So that's $8 a month, and you have access to all my videos. And there's already 2 or 3 or 4 cooking videos on there, but I'll do more. Ezekiel, next question.
All right, next question is, are dung beetles necessary for a healthy soil?
Dung beetles are not necessary for the soil, but you have to realize that diversity is necessary for a healthy soil. We live in a world of thinking that it comes from the reductionist mindset. 100% of universities, at least I think that's a true statement. Maybe I should say 99.99999% of universities today are reductionist science. Otherwise, we can't isolate things and use the scientific method to do anything, because the scientific method is incredibly hard to come up with a theory and a set of tests to learn and to move forward if we're using holistic science. But in our management, we need to be using holistic science. I mean, reductionist science is great to make breakthroughs and to learn what's happening, but in our management, if all we use is reductionist, we're really behind the times, and we're not going to have everything we need to have, you know, the results we want. So yeah, no, you don't have to have a dung beetle, but if you don't have the dung beetle, it's not going to work as good or as well. If you don't have dung beetles, I certainly hope you have a really healthy earthworm count, because what happens in an ecosystem is you have complexity. There's a lot of complexity in the ecosystem. It's so complex, we don't even understand all the relationships. We're making new discoveries all the time of the ecological relationships that are happening between all of the different flora and fauna that are in that ecosystem. And so if you have a cow pie and it hits the ground and there's no insects or animals of any kind to decompose it, then it just sits there and it dries up. In fact, when we're doing range management, that's how we know if the mineral cycle is working in an area. If you walk through your field and there's dried up cow pies, you know right off your mineral cycle is not working. I mean, that's how you know. That's the number one thing. Just walk across anywhere that cattle are, and if there's dried up cow pies, your mineral cycle doesn't work. They should never dry up. They should be decomposed and consumed by all the different types of animals, bugs, worms, fungus, bacteria. They should consume all of those cow pies. Okay.
All right, I've got one more question on my list right here.
Okay, let's do it.
How can I encourage birds to come and eat my bugs, but not eat my plants?
How do you encourage birds to eat the bugs, but not the plants? I'm assuming the bugs are on the plants. You know, this is a rough one. This is tough. I don't know. Pigeons love to eat brassicas. And so if you put a net over it to keep the pigeons off, then the other birds that eat that are the predators for the bad bugs are like not gonna. I don't know. Here's why I don't know. I've never had a lot of these problems. There's a lot of these problems that people deal with, and they ask me how to fix them. They're like, this is a disaster. What I have found over the years is that the reason people are having these disasters is they're local problems. And the worst pests I ever saw, I was in Riverton, Utah for 2 growing seasons, helping a farmer there. And during those 2 growing seasons, I saw more pest problems than I could imagine right there in the Salt Lake Valley. It was the worst pest place I have ever seen. And I have never seen worse soils. The native soils are fine, but the way that people manage their soils there, tons of toxins in those, in the whole valley. I mean, Home Depot's getting rich selling all that junk that they sell. And what has happened is it has stopped the functioning of the soil. And so ecology thinks it's an ecological disaster. And what happens in ecological disasters? The pests come in to clean it up. And so I feel bad for people who live in areas like that where all their neighbors have messed it all up. I'm not saying you can't have a successful garden, but you're probably not going to be relying on birds to eat the pests. I wouldn't rely on that anyway, even if I had a functioning soil. So if you're having a serious pest problem, don't count on the birds. I would just try to get rid of the specific pest. But that's putting a band-aid, you know, it's putting a band-aid on your head when somebody's hitting you with a baseball bat. If somebody's hitting you with a baseball bat repeatedly over the head, don't put a band-aid on it. You've got to stop them from hitting you. That's the thing to do. You've got to go to the root cause. And so in a place like the Salt Lake Valley where there's huge pest problems due to soils that are not working, get your soil functioning first. And you do that by building these 5 spheres we've talked about. So the number one thing you do is cover your soil with 3 to 5 inches of a really good compost. If you don't do anything else, do that, and then plant your plants in it and keep it watered and keep your plants living in it throughout the year. So yeah, anyway, so there's that. I ranted and raved a lot. I hope I didn't offend somebody. My personality could offend people. I don't think about that. So I am sorry in advance. Okay, Zeke, what other questions we got?
That's everything I have written down. The only other one that was in chat.
Let's go through the chat and see.
Let me review. Oh, well, I did have one other question I was asked, and I know I asked you about this in private. I guess I better ask in here. What do you think about efforts to restore balanced ecosystems through reintroducing native predators, such as wolves and bears and cougars and whatnot?
If I have young children standing at a bus stop at dawn, waiting for a bus to show up, I don't want wolves in my area because I know enough about wolves through my own study and my own personal experience with wolves in the wild that I wouldn't want them in my community. We can still have an extremely healthy ecosystem without a predator that could kill people, especially vulnerable children. So that's my thought on that. We don't have to have every species in every place to have a healthy ecosystems. I do think we probably need more predators than we do have, but I certainly wouldn't want wolves. I know enough about wolves. I've had some encounters with wolves and it's not fun. Okay, I pulled up my chat. There are a couple more questions here. Salsify. Who asked this? Who knows what salsify is? There must be an educated person. Most people have never heard of salsify. Okay, salsify, aka giant dandelion, and dandelion plants are good plants to eat. Yes, they are. I love those. Dandelions are very good to eat. Dandelions are great. I think it would really help the ecologies of our cities, especially the cities, if people had let the dandelions grow. Now I've just made enemies now, people trying to sell weed and feed, but they're good. They're important. They're a good one. There's another question here. Is that why one of your principles in the Georgics program is seeing the whole picture? I wonder when you wrote that and what I was saying at the time. Is that why one of your principles in the Georgics program is seeing the whole picture? Yes, you certainly need to see the whole picture. If you don't see the whole picture, then you are going to make decisions that you will regret in the future when you learn more. All right. Seeing the whole picture is hugely important in all things, in all parts of life. You know, imagine being a religious person, but you couldn't read the Bible. Well, if you know history, we know that that didn't turn out very good, because then people in charge of the church, they didn't really care about religion, and they took advantage of the people and they oppressed the people. So thank goodness for Tyndale, right? Who made it possible for people to read the Bible. Anyway, so yeah, you know, I think in 300 years from now, we're going to look back at this point in history and we're going to say, wow, that was such the most fantastic thing in history. Why were people so stupid about ecology? How could that have possibly happened? The food was such poor quality and people didn't even know it was poor quality. How could that have happened with all of the miraculous things? Okay, another question here. I've been reading a book on foraging, wildlife, plants, and salsify was one of them. It was written by Samuel Thayer. That is great. Good for you. Foraging wild plants is a good thing. I love that. Okay, Zeke, is that all the questions?
One above that. What good books do you recommend for beneficial weeds we can eat or use for medicinal purposes?
You know what? I'm gonna do something weird. I'm gonna run to the other room and grab a book and bring it in here, because I don't know the name of it, so I have to find it. So give me 1 minute.
And if anybody else has any other questions, we still have a good minute, so go ahead and throw them into the chat.
Okay, I'm coming. Okay, I got it here. I'm gonna stop my screen share so you can see my camera. Okay, there's that. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yep.
So this is called, what's it called? Wild Edible Plants. I love this book. It's so good. It's a fun one. It's by John Callis. So I don't know. Hopefully you can see that on the screen. Hopefully that's focused. But this is a great book. It's not an inclusive book, but he does tell you how to make marshmallows out of wild marshmallow plant. See, I'll prove it right here. See, he's making marshmallows. So for the kids that are on here, I know kids are getting on here and watching these. See there, I turned the page. There's a plate full of homemade marshmallows from wild plants. So, but yeah, so you can forage for all kinds of awesome things. And it's a common weed. It's the mallow weed. Don't know if you can see that on here, but if any of you have been gardening in North America, I'm sure you've seen this come up near your gardens or in your gardens. Well, that's the mallow plant. And if you let enough of them grow, you can pick the roots and boil them down and make marshmallows. But so that's one of my favorites. It's a good one. That's a good book. Okay, any more questions?
Yes. Melanie, I'm sorry if I don't quite interpret this correctly, but her question is, do you leave cherry trees open source in the morning like peach trees? Melanie, you might want to throw in a comment there clarifying what you meant, because I'm not sure I interpreted that quite right. Sorry about that.
I think the voice to text was giving her problems. Okay, read me a different question. We'll come back to that if she clarifies it.
She just did. Do you leave cherry trees open the mid-flea like peach trees?
Oh, I know what she's talking about. She's talking about pruning them. So no, a cherry tree usually does better if it has a central leader like an apple tree that goes straight up. So a peach tree, you would want to cut those central branches out so that you had 4 branches going out, you know. It's like an open vase peach tree. Peach trees are all trees, all fruit trees make a really good espalier thing too. So those of you who are living in cities and you're just wanting to landscape your yards with an edible landscape, it's super fun if you just want to like plant a tree next to a building or a lattice, and then you can have it grow like up the wall and you can prune it so it's flat against the wall. It's called a espalier, but that's a really fun way to do it too. But yeah, traditionally cherry trees are more of an upright, straight up type of thing. Yeah.
Awesome. Another one. I'm getting a couple blueberry bushes next week. I've been told they need acidic soil. How do I know if my soil is acidic enough, or is there something I can do to increase acidity in the soil when I plant?
That depends on the soil you already have. So I would, this is a tricky one. Here's what you're going to do. This is probably the only time that I will ever tell anybody to do this is with blueberries. But you may want to go to your Home Depot or Lowe's or local garden center and get a bag of the fertilizer specifically for blueberries. But that, you know, it's tricky. Blueberries are tough and they're tricky. If you live in a place where you can naturally grow those guys, they grow really good, but to amend the soil for them, it's pretty technical and it's hard. So I would keep growing them in a pot, just grow them in a bigger pot. Because I mean, if you say you're getting them, so I'm assuming they're coming either in a pot or they're going to be in or they'll be bare root, so they're not in a pot. So just go get some potting soil that's already prepared for blueberries and grow them that way. I mean, it's only 2 plants. If you were talking about a farm and you were doing like an acre of them, I'd have a completely different answer, but that's going to be the best way to just do a couple of plants. Okay, Zeke, what's next?
I am out of questions. Let me verify that nobody else has asked any, but yeah, I think we're out of questions. I think that's everything.
Okay.
Well, Melanie has another good question. How do you prune an apple tree as compared to a cherry or a peach? Well, we're on
an apple tree, first year, it depends what you're starting with. So first year, does that mean it's a 1-year-old sapling, or does that mean it's your first year with a 5-year-old tree in a pot? Because that's different. So how big is your apple tree? How old is your apple tree and how big is it? I need to know those two things and then I'll tell you. Okay, so it's a bare root tree. So it's probably a younger tree if it's bare root. So yeah, just stick it in the ground. Make sure you're burying it in the ground that's at the same level as it was growing in the soil before. And you can tell that because the bark will change color. And so you don't want it deeper and you don't want it shallower. And but you're asking about pruning. So it'll have a stem that's going kind of straight up, and it'll probably have some branches coming off. I would cut the stem down a little ways, and you'll see a bud on the side of the branch somewhere, and cut just above that bud, a strong bud, but you don't want to leave that tip all the way up. So just probably cut it off a little bit. And then your scaffolding, your branches that are going out, tip all those off too. So, and then they will grow out new fresh. I should draw you a picture. Here's a picture. I don't know how to draw on the computer, so I'm going to hold this up in a minute. Okay, so here's my picture. Okay, so here's your tree coming up. So cut the tip off up here, cut this one off here, and this one here, and that one there. So it looks like you almost killed it. So you're not cutting them completely off, you're leaving 5 to 6 inches. Okay, I see a question here. When will be a good time to start making compost? Is it better to start in warm weather or does it not really matter? Warm weather is easier. If you have never made compost before, it will be well worth your money to get on my Patreon account and watch all my compost making videos. And so because I take you through that entire process. I have like 20 or 30 videos on compost. And so if you watched all of those, you would be an expert by the time you get done with them. But warm weather is easier because you do need the material to be warmer to create the heat necessary to make a good compost. If you start in the cold weather, you need 2 to 3 times as much material so that you have a great big giant mass of material so that the internal temperature can stay warm enough so that it doesn't cool off too much. So yeah, warmer weather is the best time. All right, if that's all the questions, then maybe we will wrap this up. What is my link for the $8 a month? Here's what you do. Go to, I'm going to put my website on the screen right here. Okay, if you look down here.
You need to share your screen again.
Really? Oh, wow. I wonder how to do that. It's a good thing.
I also put the link in the chat.
Did you? Yeah, it's www.georgicrevolution.com. And then it's my Patreon thing is on there. You can click on it. Huh. Aha. I found where I am. I think. Share screen. I did it. Everybody else in the world can do this easy. Did it work? Can you see my screen? Oh, I turned on my microscope camera.
No, I don't see your screen.
The screen share didn't work. Okay, whatever Ezekiel's put on there is going to work. It's www.georgicrevolution.com. That goes to my website. And then you can see my you can get onto Patreon from there, and it will walk you through. So once you get onto Patreon, it will be pretty easy for you to yeah, you just scroll through the videos until you find the compost ones.
You have successfully shared the screen of your microscope now, Father.
Whoa, dear, I'm such an idiot when it comes to computers. I couldn't even do this if you weren't on here with me. Like every week I have to relearn how to do everything before we start and let people in. It's so funny. Well, everybody else on here can do this probably easy. So hilarious. Yeah, I shared my screen, except now I don't know what to do. Whatever.
Now you
Okay,
can pull
are there
out a
any more
soil
questions?
sample. I would like to start watching your videos, but I would like to start at the beginning. Is there a way I can watch the old videos first without scrolling to the bottom?
Nope, that's the way Patreon is made, and I am sorry. That's just the way they do their thing. So you have to scroll to the bottom and start clicking on them. So that's a drawback to the Patreon videos. And so I'm sorry about that, but that's just how they have their website set up. Okay. All right, are we done? Is that all the questions? I've got a few more minutes I can take if you guys want to, if you do have more questions, I'll certainly answer them right now. Just need to type them in there. So. I guess I could tell you what next week's will be. Next week's class. Next week is the proper handling of produce at harvest time. So that's going to be our subject for next week. When we harvest, what do we do with our vegetables? And what is the proper way to harvest them? So I'm going to go into that in a little bit of detail next week. So thank you everybody for getting on. This recording will be on YouTube as soon as it uploads. It usually takes a couple of days. And thank you very much. I appreciate you. And hopefully the things I have to are helpful for you. So share this with your friends and your family so that when we have food shortages, nobody will be hungry. It will be interesting to know if food shortages will actually hit the United States, because we do have a strong dollar, but there are world food shortages. And so I feel super bad for the people who are going to be hungry, because it's going to be somebody.
A clarifying question from one of the people. After planting a fruit tree, are you saying to prune them immediately at planting?
Yes, prune them when you plant them. Sometimes when I planted a lot of trees, I would put them out on a flatbed wagon and I would prune them all before I planted them. Same day. Because it was easier to just prune them all right there and then we just go plant them. So, yeah.
And Melanie, I'm getting his YouTube link right now. Give me just 1 second.
We don't want anybody to go hungry. A wise man once said, feed the hungry. And that is my purpose and mission in life, is to feed the hungry. That's why I do these classes. Because I can grow food for a lot of people, but I can't grow food for everybody. So I'm trying to teach other people how to grow food. So thank you very much for being on tonight. Share this with your friends and family. And let's grow food so that people can eat nutritious food. And even if Americans stop, even if we don't have a famine, that's what I'm trying to say, because the grocery stores are empty, we still have a famine because we don't have enough nutritious food in the world. So, yeah. So I am going to stop this, and we will see you next Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific time.
Fantastic.
So thank you and goodbye. Okay, I stopped my share. And good night, everyone. If I knew how to turn this off, I would. And Amy asks a question. Do you prune apple, apricot, peach, cherry trees the same? First year trees that are not larger than 4 feet tall. Apple, apricot, peach, and cherry. Sure, why not? The main thing is you don't want a lot of growth on top. If you have all that growth up there on top, then that little root system that you just planted is trying to support that. So you need to cut off a good, depending on the size of tree, around 4 feet tall. Yeah, you would want to cut it back like so it only has half of that wood material up on top so that the roots can support it so that it doesn't get overwhelmed and die. That's part of the reason for pruning them. That your second, third, and fourth years are a lot more important for the actual shaping of the tree. Your first year is to just get it smaller so that your root system is big enough to support it. Because anytime you're planting a tree, especially a bare root tree, that root system has been hurt, and so it's in a new environment. It's stressed out because it's been transplanted, and so you want to help it by reducing the top of it by half or a third. So yeah, I mean, what you cut off is not as important as the fact that you are cutting a bunch off. So you can, with the new growth that comes out the first, second, third, and fourth year, you can use that new growth to shape it the way you want. So the first year is not about shaping. Second, third, fourth years are about shaping. Okay. All right, good night to all and good luck gardening.